Good afternoon, everyone. We are the Group 2 and we are going to discuss about the current trends and issues in material development. But first, what are materials? Materials are anything which can be used to facilitate the learning of a language, including course books, videos, graded readers, flashcards, games, websites, and mobile phone interactions. They can be informative, informing the learner about the target language, instructional, guiding the learner in practicing the language, experiential, providing the learner with experience of the language in use, eliciting, encouraging the learner to use the language, and exploratory, helping the learners to make discoveries about the language. Ideally, materials should be developed for learning rather than for teaching, and they should perform all the functions. Materials development is a practical undertaking involving the production, evaluation, adaptation, and exploitation of materials intended to facilitate language acquisition and development. It is also a field of academic study investigating the principles and procedures of design, writing, implementation, evaluation, and analysis of learning materials. Ideally, materials development practitioners and materials development researchers interact and inform each other through conferences, publications, and shared endeavors. In the past materials development, practitioners were either teachers with little awareness of applied linguistics or applied linguists with little awareness of teaching and learning. Nowadays, there are many materials development experts who have considerable experience and expertise as teachers, as materials development practitioners, and as materials development researchers, and there have been a number of conferences recently in which materials development principles and procedures have been both discussed in the theory and demonstrated in action. Let us now talk about the trends and issues in material development.
There are two key changes in the purpose of teaching English. One is to produce fully competent English knowing bilinguals rather than imitation native speakers, as per Penny Ur. And secondly, English is not viewed as an end in itself but as a means to learn content such as science and mathematics. Content and Language Integrate Learning, or CLIL, is an approach where the English teacher uses cross-cultural content and so the students learn both the content and English. Now that we know what is the purpose of teaching it, let's now talk the early start in teaching English. Many countries have started teaching English in earlier grades at school. For example, in 2011, Saudi Arabia and Vietnam have been introducing English from grade 4. Also in the same year, Japan introduced English in the primary stage. In 2012, Dubai introduced English in the kindergarten stage instead of grade 1. There are many changes in the approach to teaching culture. Both the local or native and international culture dominate in English language classes. There is less focus on teaching the culture of native speakers of English unless there is a specific purpose for doing so. In teaching English, the teacher will be a crucial factor for the success of teaching it. It is increasingly recognized that the quality or effectiveness of teachers is determined by their linguistic, teaching, and intercultural competence rather than their being a native speaker of English.
Trend 5. Change in teaching content and test design. Teachers use a range of local texts or English translations of literature in the classroom. The use of L1 as appropriate as well as the use of a variety of accents in listening activities or tests are encouraged in English language classrooms. Trend 6. E-learning. Because of the proliferation of tablets and smartphones, they believe that textbooks will disappear in a few years. Furthermore, the access of knowledge in terms of flexibility and mobility has changed drastically. Trend 7 is strategic teaching and learning. Teaching in English language classes focuses on fostering student thinking as well as language content, outcomes, and learning activities. There are significant and complex student-teacher interactions inside and outside the classroom. The gamification of learning is emerging as a way to make language learning more engaging and relevant to the younger generation. Trend 8. Teachers as lifelong learners. In a knowledge-based society, and to remain competitive and employable, teachers are expected to engage in continuous professional development or professional learning activities from the beginning to the end of their careers. As with any other profession, teachers are also expected to assume greater responsibility for their own professional learning, continually developing their knowledge and skills.
The language problem and modernization for Pacific Basin countries may be seen to stem from both a variety of communication needs, or the interlanguage problem, and from the need for interlanguage development. Many countries in this region are at the point of redefining the roles colonial languages are to serve and are considering how to best develop local language resources. Given limited financial resources, careful planning will be needed if a satisfactory balance is to be achieved between vernacular, national language, and international language development. While language policy development is obviously critical to the language modernization process, so is proper implementation. Thoughtful planners and imaginative language plans are all for broad without effective implementation. Three critical factors in the implementation process are teacher training and the development of good teaching materials, followed by an adequate scheme to evaluate program effectiveness. Thus, I would argue that a sound national program for language modernization must not only be based on an adequate survey of language needs, but must try to specify in realistic terms how this language can be met.
According to McKinnon and Humphreys, the production of learning materials is one of the most difficult and neglected areas of educational development. If you don't believe this is true, pick up a few standard English language school texts and see how terrible many of them are, both in terms of content and design. For our ESL or vernacular language materials, we haven't have the time, the money, or the expertise to waste on producing poorly planned programs which contain poorly written or designed materials. Since the current low state of funding is unlikely to change overnight, I believe we must strive for planned language modernization programs which seriously consider the problems of quality materials development and staff training as part of the overall planning process. We can contribute and help to better understand the whole language modernization process in two ways. First, when we undertake planned language modernization activities, we should monitor our actions to see what changes seem to result for them. Second, we can look for recent documentable examples of language modernization and then try to analyze them and apply the results to other language modernization projects or developmental materials. I hope this presentation will help to stimulate some discussion toward these ends and towards these trends and issues in material developments. Thank you!